With a title like that, thank God I have no interest in making money from YouTube. This is Flask Zero, a 0 Hours Christmas in Time tie-in, written by Martin Quaid, with art by Ringus from the Beatles. Before I begin, I need to apologise to Ringus because he is going to, unfortunately, have to take some collateral damage for involvement in an issue that I not only think is dog shit, but an enormous signifier of Martin Quaid's personality disorders. This is a 0 Hours Christmas in Time tie-in, and it resolves a plot beat from that. We didn't get it recapped very well in this issue, which is another in a long line of grievances with this dreadful, directionless slosh of excrement. My opinion on 0 Hours Christmas in Time has gone from ambivalence to respect and even admiration. And it pains me that this issue, which arguably is one of the most essential tie-ins, is so crap. I will try to recap what you need to know. In 0 Hours Christmas in Time, we had the Flask, the Willie West version, Appear to Die. It was a callback to Barney Allen dying in Christmas on Infinite Earths. Willie West was in the future, the 64th century, fighting Alakazam. A story you got more context for in the issue of Flask before this. I think it is issue 94. But when that story happened, 0 Hours Christmas in Time began, and the 64th century was victim to the entropy wave that was slowly erasing all of the time stream down to the titular 0 hour, an hour in 1994, from which the bad guy, Green Lanterns, evil Jordan Albert, wished to recreate the world. I think I described that better than 0 Hours Christmas in Time ever did. In an incredibly on-the-nose reference to Barney Allen, Willie West has to run faster than he has ever gone before to try and reverse the impending void. He tries to create a vortex big enough to redirect it back onto itself, but he isn't successful. He is seen to perish, very reminiscently of Barney Allen. I suppose it is a bit extreme and even totally pointless to get rid of Willie West for the story only as a reference to another story, but it becomes even stupider when he returns straight away afterwards with so little effort or importance. You see, Willie West, he has become lost in space-time. In comics, if you have West in your name, you get lost in space-time. And I hate this issue. It is a mix of boring and then insufferably grating when we get to the bit where Martin Quaid bares his soul. We are not going to look much at these little bits where Willie West observes events from his life because they are boring and it didn't mean much of anything besides Martin Quaid discreetly inserting retcons to bolster his own version of Flask mythos. We are instead going to talk about the time Martin Quaid was the reason for a murder. In the late 80s, Martin Quaid was an editor at DC, and one of the projects he edited was this Crimson Mist miniseries that was written by Roger Thomas. The artist on this was an up-and-comer called Greg Brooks. This is about his only credit, at least his only credit in comics. He probably has credits for jail time served. Martin Quaid had an affair with Greg Brooks' wife, and it drove Greg Brooks to murder his wife with a hammer in a jealous rage. Grisly shit. And a story like that, it should have you somewhat sympathetic to Martin Quaid. He inadvertently drove a man to kill a woman, and worse, a woman that Martin Quaid presumably had some affection for. Instead, Martin Quaid comes off as the villain in the story that involves an actual murderer because Martin Quaid thought that it was hilarious. He would joke about it in the DC offices for 20 years afterwards. He mounted a hammer to the wall and christened it the Greg Brooks Memorial Hammer, and he snuck in jokes into comics about it. Supposedly, his ban from working for DC was because he was still laughing about this horrible thing that he caused. Let's take a moment now to discuss part of the problem with Martin Quaid gossip and stories. It is hard to find sources these days. I have been following comics online for nearly 2 decades, so I have seen all these stories when they were still out there. There were countless and countless stories about Martin Quaid having anger issues, him putting his fists through walls, him trashing officers, him having horrible tantrums, and him being an all-around arsehole to people. There's a story that when CrossGen failed, he sent a wreath to the editor with the note, "I hope your dead wife is proud of you now." Like, really, he is a colossal arsehole and legitimately a sociopath. No doubt about that. He takes joy in destroying and hurting things. But why is all this stuff suddenly gone? All these articles with other creators telling stories about Martin Quaid being a twat and a big baby. Well, in September 2018, Martin Quaid, he was going to be sued by YouTube wankpot diversity in a comic book. The internet, the collected comics industry and comics journalists, they made a coordinated effort to scrub virtually anything that painted Martin Quaid in a negative light. Martin Quaid was now the great man who will take the evil Nazi to court. And it's so frustrating because this Greg Brooks story is seemingly completely true. There's stuff like him harassing people at conventions, him trashing a comic book store, the commonly regarded and almost confessed to accusation that a lot of his most acclaimed DC comics were actually written by the editor. There's all these stories that have been scrubbed from the internet to twist the narrative that he is a good man. You're left with posts on Reddit or anonymous comments on blogs as the only apparent reference or source of evidence. I cannot even access a forum thread about it on a forum that I am a member of. A forum that Martin Quaid is also a member of. A forum which Martin Quaid has had people banned from. Back to this issue. I am showing this page because Willie West as a kid in this montage looks cute as a button. In the journey through Willie West's history, Martin Quaid introduces a bunch of retcons wherein almost everything that resulted in Willie West becoming Kid Flask and then later the Flask. It was a paradox brought about by his secret presence there as a time ghost observing everything. And that is quite pathetic, but the thing I really want to focus on is the insulting shit. Willie West, he eventually falls backwards in time so much that he is now at a family reunion where he was a little child. And this is an important part of Willie West's history because Martin Quaid does not understand why a person would be a hero. Martin Quaid thinks there needs to be a reason for a superhero to be a good person. They are not heroes because they are decent or selfless individuals. There is always something else at play whenever Martin Quaid writes a superhero. Like here, we say that Willie West from the future, he told kid Willie West that he would grow up to be a hero. That he has to be a good boy. That he has to fight against injustice. That he has to be righteous and true. That is why Willie West is a hero. He is completing a prophecy he was told one time by a stranger who said that he had to be a hero. Not because Willie West is simply a good person, but because someone told him he would be one. This is not a single instance with Martin Quaid either. Martin Quaid obviously doesn't understand why or how someone would be a good person, because he himself is not one. The concept of morals or altruism or selflessness, they are completely alien to Martin Quaid. He thinks that the source of those attributes in a person needs a cold, rational explanation like this, or when he wrote a retelling of Superman's origin story. Superman, generally considered the greatest superhero of all time. The most perfect, upstanding, considerate, truly good person around. The definition of a superhero. Martin Waid used this series to establish why he thinks Superman saves people's lives. Superman, he saves lives because Superman's supervision sees energy auras around living people. And when they die, the energy disappears. And so Superman, he has to stop people from dying because it upsets him to see the lack of colour surrounding them, rather than because he's a fucking hero doing the right fucking thing. It is not a single line of dialogue in it either. It is a running theme throughout that overlong shite Superman story. Superman's selfless nature, Superman's inherent decency, Superman's love for life. It is all replaced with an excuse that Martin Waid's fucked up sociopathic brain can fucking understand. Happy Martin Waid week, everyone. I will give Marvel Zombies 4, which I reread recently, a 7 thumbs up.